Human design is a part science, part spiritual system that tells you who you came here to be. You have your own blueprint, your own way of becoming successful, your own way your dreams are going to come true, the way you'll experience the most joy and fulfillment. The instruction manual for how to move through the world is custom to you. When you act according to that manual, when you act as the real you, everything in life comes to you with more ease and less resistance. We all know we're different, yet we're still acting like there's one way to do life. Let's talk about it. To find out your design and the designs of the people in your life, you can visit myhumandesign.com or download the My Human Design app in the App Store and on Google Play.
I remember when I first learned about human design and how important the authority was and how excited I was that there was an explanation of the specific way that I hear my intuition. But I also remember the very beginning, I had a hard time discerning the difference between what is the voice of my authority and what is the voice of, maybe my conditioning, my fears, my ego. So can you help us understand, no matter what our authority is, how do you discern the difference between that voice and all the other voices?
I think that's one of the most common questions we get, is that what is fear versus what is intuition? And I think enough people are saying, well, intuition feels calm and grounded and fear feels contractive. And that is true, but it's almost too simple. And sometimes intuition doesn't feel calm and grounded. Sometimes your intuition feels excited. Sometimes your intuition feels happy. Sometimes it feels like, oh my gosh, it's a revelation and it's just filled me with life force. So like a lot of these tropes, they're helpful, but only to a point because they are always oversimplified. I've recently caught myself so much in my real life noticing how often there'll be a conversation about some kind of spiritual concept going on in the group that I'm in. And my brain is already thinking of like all the different caveats and all the like other layers that are to it and all the nuances that I missed out. And I'm like, there's not enough time in the day to explain all these nuances. That's why we have a podcast. But I think that it's really dependent, like every other piece of spiritual growth, on knowing yourself. And I think that there's not enough tools in our world that help us know ourselves, because let's think about it. It's so much easier to listen to a podcast. It's so much easier to do a program. It's so much easier to have a session with somebody than to almost have the discipline to take your own hand and be proactive about the actual application, right? Like, where does everyone else's guidance stop? You have to pick up that sort of handle, that mantle, and say, okay, I'm going to carry this on. And listen, I'm still lazy at it too. There'll be times when that's the last thing I feel like doing, or I'm like, I don't have clarity on this. And that's how we lean on other people. And I was actually talking to my brother today about how you can experience so much growth when you seek out other people's visibility on helping you see what is fear versus what is intuition. When you can surround yourself with people who know what you want out of life, and they can say, but this is a blind spot of yours, because we've spoken about this before on this podcast. You are blind to your own blind spots. And that's why we do all need each other. So the first layer is, don't expect yourself to do this alone. As much as you can, open yourself up, even if it's going to bruise your ego, to have other people be able to help you discern. Or if you're really, wondering, like, is this my intuition or is this my fear? Can you speak to someone else about it? Someone who knows you really well, and someone who you give an invitation to be radically honest with you, because the honesty is the gift, and the honesty is someone who loves you and is going to be kind to someone who is okay to give you something that might give you a little bit of a sting, but you have to let them know that you're okay to feel stung, because you know that that's for your highest good too. So that's layer one, like, seek reflection and mirroring from people. Layer two is, yes, there is a general truth to the fact that fear will make you contract, but I think fear will also make you control. Fear will give you this illusion that you have the sense of control back, and that's what you're seeking, for a sense of safety in the world, right? Whereas intuition sometimes is going to gently whisper at you in terms of, this is the truth, but there's going to be something you're going to have to give up in order to believe that this is the truth. And the thing you're going to have to give up is not trying to get an answer to get back the sense of control you were used to, right? It's an invitation to step into a different mode of living that might not feel like you're regaining what you're seeking to regain. So that's why I think sometimes we get tripped up, because we're like, no, but my intuition's telling me to do something I don't want to do, or something that's scary, or something that I'm resisting, you know? And so it isn't as simple as saying fear is going to make you feel scared, because sometimes listening to your real self is going to make you scared as hell, because you're giving up what you've always done. You're giving up automatic pilot, which has become our comfort zone. So it isn't as easy as saying, you know, your intuition is always going to be the one that's going to make you feel safe, because listening to your fears also makes you feel safe. But there's another layer. If you can justify and logicize and get on your high horse about why what you're thinking to do is correct, that is usually a fear. Because that is a well-rehearsed, well-trodden voice in your mind that knows how to feel back in control. And the second you ask him or her what it's saying, it has that tightly spun spin doctor, you know, narrative ready to go as soon as you ask her. Whereas intuition, real intuition, is where our form and our consciousness meet the sort of mystical voice of the light, the creator, the universe, whatever you want to call it, and how it comes through us, right? That's where the divine speaks and moves through us. And so our limited human mind can't explain why it's telling us to do certain things. It can't have the spin for why it's coming in, because there is no, for real true intuition, there is such an originality to that intuition, where it is a feeling that doesn't have any predecessors. It doesn't have any previously laid foundation. It just comes out of nowhere, because it's that true connection to original thought, to original spark, to really feeling the moment as if it is brand new, as if no moment has ever come before and no moment will ever come. It's that where the lightning bolt of divine comes into this moment and makes this moment come alive. That's intuition. And so it's about being fully present. And so when you are fully present, you can't explain why it makes sense because of the original context. You can't explain what it's going to lead to. You just know that it is the most mystical truth that you can reach for in this very moment. And I can appreciate that when I say a mystical truth, that sometimes intuition is something that seems very banal. Like, you know, we've spoken about you with drinking whole milk before. And that doesn't seem like it's, you know, the heavens opening, but there is a mysticism to it, because it almost surprises you and takes you by surprise and doesn't come from you, because your logic sure as hell would never have told you to do that. And your brain didn't come up with it, because there's such a difference between knowing that you thought your way into something versus when you sensed it. And so it's one of those things where when it comes from your intuition, you sense it, i.e., with every sensor of your body, if every cell in your body is just a receptor to truth, did you pick it up with your full self? Or did you pick it up by thinking your way into the answer? Now, thinking your way into the answer is a wonderful thing. It's something that we need to be doing. We've been given it for a reason, and we are supposed to do it when we're looking at life and we're looking to solve a challenge or an issue, or there's a system break, or we're looking for a more efficient thing to do, or a more creative way to take the picture sometimes, or whatever it is. But when we're really tapping into that guidance of our life path and our journey and our own personal evolution, and what is aligned for us in any given moment, like the milk, or like saying something to someone or not, that's when we have to be wise enough to know that trying to come up with the answer ourselves is not good enough. And that's where we say, okay, what have you got for me? And, you know, I really want to say that if I, at 22 years old, was listening to me now, I would be chortling. I'd be like, what do you mean? Answers don't just come to me. I don't do that. You're clearly just, some kind of different human being. And what I will say is that, like anything, the first time you open yourself up to sensing a truth, it's probably not going to come. The second time you open yourself to hearing a truth, you're also going to feel like your mind is going to want to think your way into telling yourself that you managed to get it. So it's really not about expecting the first time to be descriptive or prescriptive about how the rest of your intuitive journey is going to become. It's more that you have to hone it by showing the universe enough times that you were willing to receive what it was going to give you. And by the time your willingness is big enough and you've practiced trotting that road over and over again of saying, I'm not expecting my mind to have it. What have you got for me? And even if it sounds like the most ridiculous voice that says something to you that you would never want to listen to, you at least take stock of it. Then that becomes a place eventually, bit by bit, where you learn, okay, my intuition is razor sharp. It knows so much better. And it's not my intuition. It's me tapping into the divine intuition that, wants to come to me. But you don't get that overnight. And there's only ever new levels. And I'm still learning to trust mine in certain areas, even if I'm razor sharp in it in some other areas. So, we are all so deeply intuitive, but we also are all on this journey for as long as we're alive of learning to sign out of the ego mind and of trying to force answers and force clarity at the timeline that it's meant to come into. And I'm so happy that you're bringing this up today, because the time when we are recording this, there's a real liminal space going on that everyone is going through collectively at the moment, where it's almost as if the last couple of months was so fast. There was so much movement, all these eclipses, we were all rocked. Worlds were changing so quick, and everyone's reality was just like things were coming out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, things have really slowed to a halt. And what we're really being faced with at the moment is hold on a second. Intuition is really coming to all of us in such a deep way, because we have 5 planets in water at the moment. And water as an element is that sort of, underwater. Where do we get things? We're disconnected from reality. That's when we can actually tap into the ineffable more, and we can receive downloads and messages more. But it also requires us to go underwater. What does that mean? To lose sight of the narratives, to lose sight of what we call reality, to not tell the same stories, to not cling to the same outcomes as we're hoping for. And that's why it's hard to hear the messages sometimes, is because we stand in our own way of, no, but I need this person to like me, or I need this certain amount of money to come through, or it needs to be this town that I find my home in, or I need to, I need to have this kind of relationship with my mom or my husband or my whatever, or so it's it's to the extent that we are not willing to have a death of what we want things to unfold as, that we're not willing to hear that actually right now the universe is so full of such creative, out of non-linear path answers for us, if we can slow down enough to just realize okay, what if the answers I'm really clinging to right now are good, but there's maybe something better out there if I can just slow down and listen. And that's where we really are going to get challenged, but we also can really listen and get new intuitive downloads to a degree that we haven't had before. If we say, you know what, I don't need to feel like I'm this special intuitive person with more special powers than everyone else to be able to receive messages. I just need to realize that I'm actually really freaking stupid, like all of us are, And what I need to do is realize that all my best laid plans are actually kind of dumb compared to the divine intelligence. So let me just park those to the amount of time that feels safe to me and see what happens. And you know what, universe, if I'm going to do my part, show me what you got.
That's one of my favorite things that you say when you're talking to the universe and trying to figure out your intuition. You kind of talk to it come on, okay, well, if I'm going to do my side, then you better do your side. So if I'm going to risk this, if I'm going to trust this thing that I've never trusted before, you better show up.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we're so used to putting the universe on a pedestal. We're like, please, poor unworthy me, I have to beg. But the divine is us. And so there is sometimes a not in a sort of entitled, insecure way, but in an entitled, like, I am divine. You want me to remember I'm divine. I'm doing my part. So meet me where I'm at. Like, and having that command over those forces, because those forces are here to help us.
And correct me if I'm wrong, because obviously there are a handful of different authorities that someone could have in their chart. So not everyone is going to have a similar, even physical experience of what their authority will feel like. But for me, when I was first learning, it felt like I thought decision making had to have this pressure. Like there was this pressure that I was pressing my brain to like come up with the answer of what I should do. And when I was putting that pressure on myself, that's when I kind of started to notice the difference, where when I'm putting the pressure, that was me immediately trying to take the answer up here to my mind. But when I let that pressure go and actually trusted, you know what, the answer will actually come to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to pull the answer out of me. That's when I started to actually be able to hear I'm splenic authority. So that's when I got quiet and stopped pressuring, is when I could actually hear that voice coming through.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what happened to you?
So it's interesting because I think you're right. You can't pressure the answer from here, but you also can set yourself up to receive the answer properly. So for example, with you, even if, for example, you've gotten a guidance out of nowhere where you haven't asked for it, like if it said, okay, go to the coffee shop today instead of work from home, right? You are now at a place, and I think it's important because you're so well versed at this now. But for people who, you know, they hear those splenic hits, for example, all the time, but just aren't used to thinking that they're worth anything, you really went through a journey of at least noticing, oh, that is my spleen. Oh, hello, spleen. You know, even if you were like, actually, no, I don't, what's good is going to come of it? Why would I work? Why would I go to the coffee shop in the beginning? That was what you probably would have said. You at least are like, oh, that is my spleen. So you're creating the differential of sometimes your authority will say things to you that you haven't asked for it. And also, it always does come through for you when you are needing an answer, and that's when you get quiet and you ask it. So yes, you can have your authority show up when it's uninvited, and it will guide you. And that's when you need to learn what it sounds like to you and what it feels like and when it's coming. And you also need to learn, like you said, to, you know, let the answer come to you because you ask your spleen, and because I check in with my emotions, or because people, you know, maybe check with their sacral or their ego or whatever it is. And so you have to leave the space for it to, when it comes to you, at least for you to recognize, because awareness is 90% of the work, recognize that that's a different voice that's coming to you than what normally would come to you. And also that when you need the answer, you get quiet, you put what you're saying, I think, is you put your mind aside and you give space for the spleen to come and sit at the table. Is that the way you would describe it?
Yeah, I stopped trying to come up with the answer and just like know that my system can do its thing and deliver me with an answer. The other thing I did was, when I read about splenic authority, I like immediately, and I don't know that this happens to everyone, I immediately had one instance in my life that I remember a feeling that sounded similar to what you were describing in the app. I was like, oh, that's what it feels like. And it was such a crazy experience and something I followed. It had been like 3 years before I even read about it. So sometimes it's even maybe a good tip is thinking about a time when you've maybe had a similar experience to what your authority is being described as, and sort of trying to recreate or trying to feel into like what you felt in that time.
Absolutely. And if you haven't, or if you want to do both, especially with a splenic authority, I tell people, like, even if you can't listen, keep a splenic diary of all the hits that have come to you, because you'll be able to look back in hindsight, and actually that will be the evidence that, oh, if I'd done that, it maybe would have worked out, or that spleen knew what it was saying based on what I can now see. So yes, absolutely. And the spleen is a sort of a very not easy one to follow, but it's an easier one to note down because it's so kind of messaged. But for example, with even if your sacral authority, for example, you know, you can think about a time when you made yourself say yes to something that you really didn't want to and that you shoulded yourself into, and how maybe you've now had to deal with the ramifications of how much energy it has cost you. Maybe the cost of actually having to undo all of that or unwind some of those decisions, right? Like, it doesn't only cost you time, but it costs you the time it also might take to reset yourself back to how you were before you committed your energy into doing something, right? Because especially with generators, a yes is a commitment, meaning you are locked in to a certain degree to a path for a certain amount of time. You are in a container. And whenever you are saying a yes to something, you are also not available for other yeses. And so it's a double cost, basically, when you're saying yes to something that is a no. And then with emotional authority, because there is this pressure to, give people answers straight away, you think that you're saving yourself time by trying to be immediate. But again, if you say yes today and you would have slept on it and tomorrow it would have been a no, you have to undo the time of, I'm so sorry, I can't do it anymore. And then having to and all of us having to make white lies up about why we have to get out of things or why we're locked into stuff. And by the way, all of that misalignment in ourselves is also throwing other people's path off path. So even though we think we're helping them by saying yes immediately, or by saying yes because as a generator we're helping them, or because they need our energy, or because we're codependent, whatever the story is, we are throwing other people off their path when we're not listening to our own intuition. So the real trick is that the mind is going to say to you, you have to say yes because that person's going to be disappointed. But you can't take the initial reaction as a sign of what's aligned or not. You have to trust that the universe, if it is as wonderful as we believe it to be, and as intelligent as we believe it to be, is that we live in a win-win universe. It's only humans that play this zero-sum game. A win for you, if it's aligned, is gonna by default align everyone else who is in an adjacent stream to you. Whoever else is bumping into you and whoever else you're crossing life paths with at any given point in time is reliant upon you showing up in your most aligned, keeping your side of the street clean. Otherwise, you're just leaking onto theirs. Otherwise, you are delaying their time. You're taking up their space. You're giving them misunderstandings. You're costing them then to have to realign or to have a conversation with you that they didn't need to have if you just said no straight away. So it's almost like now you get to a place where you're like, even if I have my own shit, I care about not throwing you off enough that even if I think I'm not important, I don't want to do that to you. And I think that we've actually reached that point as a collective now where we're realizing oh, I don't want to be telling that person lies because that's actually really inconveniencing them too. So even if I am not comfortable with not being cutesy and sweetsy and nice or being, the people pleaser or the whatever, I can maybe face that I'll go through an ego death of seeming like a non-people pleaser because I just care about you. Even if I can't care about my own soul that much, maybe I care about not throwing you off. And, we'll go into this so much more because I have so much to say on patterns, and that's a whole other conversation. But to the extent where you are stuck in a pattern, anyone else that you're going to come into contact with, you are literally stamping your pattern on top of them and on top of their life path, and you are creating a different reality for them. So say, for example, someone who's always in the narrative of chaos, whoever else is in their vicinity feels chaotic, and their life gets more chaotic when they're in the energy or in contact with a person whose narrative is chaos. Someone else's whose is pity is going to create other people who become saviors, or is going to pull the saviorness out of people in their vicinity. Even people who aren't used to having that pattern themselves, it's going to pull the negative pattern out of someone else if they're stuck in a pattern. So it behooves us to get rid of our own patterns because it helps us also bring the best out of other people, selfishly for ourselves to have the best experience of other humans, but also for their own self. And so it's so interesting how you and I even could be having we can go to a lunch with the same person and have a completely different tell on what that person's personality is, because that person's personality is dependent on what we and our patterns are going to pull out of them, consciously and subconsciously. Our own essence is going to draw out of that person a totally subjective experience. And so this is why we can't let our minds convince us into the best decision anymore, because the people pleasing is like holding someone else back. The not saying what's true, the dishonesty, the messing people around, the, going along with the crowd, all of that stuff is costing us too much. And we are also reaching an apex point where we are reframing what being honest and going away from the crowd can look like. Because I think the reason why we're so afraid of it is because historically it looked aggressive, it looked loud, it looked fighty, it looked like pushing everyone else away. Whereas now we have this opportunity to do it in a way that is actually leaning closer to the person, leaning into the person, creating more intimacy and vulnerability with the person by just saying from your very tender self, like, I just wish that I could keep on saying yes to you because I feel like it helps you, but I just don't feel like doing it. And can we talk about that? And that's going to be a very different conversation and a very different kind of bonding than like, you can't make me do things I don't want to do out of nowhere when they've never heard you say, anything but yes like a mouse before, right? That's unfair on that person too. So it's this practice. And again, we're not going to get it right the first time because there's no scripts in this world of people doing that. So we are the people that need to go first. So let's give ourselves also so much grace to fumble it around and get it wrong 100 times, just like Amazon probably was the wrong, model the first 100 times too. Like we are Amazon of communication and spirituality and consciousness and closeness to people.
In so many ways, I feel like we're infants in so many things. We're infants in the internet. We're infants in technology. We're infants in being able to use this piece of technology properly and like trusting that that piece of technology is more intelligent than we could ever imagine. I'm so glad you brought this up because I do think in this current moment, we do have this like collective desire to contribute to the collective. Like we all kind of want to save the world in some way. Like we're all feeling like if we're not doing something to make someone else's life better, that we're kind of, just being lazy or selfish. But this understanding your intuition is the biggest way that you can contribute to the collective because of what you just said, because we're knocking people out of alignment in a domino effect when we're not trusting our intuition. So you just cleaning up your decisions and trusting that your mechanics are going to lead you to do the things that are correct for you is actually going to, I don't know what the best analogy is. I feel like in my head, you have something to say about it. Like, what is that effect on the collective and why is it so powerful as a contributor to improving the collective?
Well, not only are you saving people from having to deal with so much involuntary shit that you're putting on their plates, right? So then they have more space to actually hear themselves and align themselves and deal with their own patterns, right? Rather than being patterned on by so many other people. But it's also that, so there's that level of, just removing stuff off other people's plates. There's also the level of entrainment where actually when they see a river that is smooth and in its own lane that we're all trying to be, it's easier for them to run like next to you, parallel to you as their own river, right? And so you then can actually hold hands on this journey rather than jumping in each other's streams the entire time, trying to meddle and interfere in the whole thing. But, and I'm sure everyone in our cluster knows this, you can easily be talking about spirituality until the cows come home thinking that that's how you change the world. But in your real life, you're totally patterning on other people and in chaos and not being true to yourself. And so what you're speaking about and what you're actually creating in the world are two different things. Some of the most aligned people in the world have never even heard of anxious attachment, have never even heard of inner child, don't know, and also don't need to know. Don't need to know because they just keep their side of the street clean. It's so funny. I was with two guys the other day and they had just gotten the app. I'd given them access to the app. And, as men do, they'd like listen to the whole chart at 1 a.m. and the next morning they like knew everything there was to say about their chart. And we've spoken about this before. We laugh about this, Taylor, where we're like, sometimes men just get it so quick and they apply it so fast because they don't complicate it, because they don't, and women, that's a beautiful thing about us is we see like so many layers and nuance and we're intuitive about it and we're flowy and whatever. But they were like, oh yeah, so oh my God, I just need to wait until I this and this. And I'm like, how did you get it so fast without needing any clarification, you know? And so I think that's part of it, is just like the making it so, the simple part is like, you really don't have to think about how you're going to change the world, because if you are aligned, the universe will use you to change everything and everyone you touch in ways that you can't even control or imagine. You will end up doing it, and you'll look back and be like, how the hell did I just do that? That wasn't me. How the hell did I have this effect on that person? Or someone will come back and say, oh my God, you said this to me. Or you will give someone an idea that just comes when you're in a car together, and that ends up being their thing. Like, you never know how we all are here to inspire, lift, help, realign each other, right? We all have that capability, and not because we're special, and not because we're spiritual, and not because we know about anxious attachment, but because if we are clean, clear, and bright, as my friend Dara would say, who's coming on the podcast soon, that is just the reality that you create in your movie. And so then anything that is in your movie, animate or inanimate, ends up looking the exact same way as the default frequency that you set for your own movie.
Yeah.
And they can't be in your movie without becoming that way too.
Yeah. And I've never even shared this example of my spleen before, but you saying just now, this idea that you have no idea the knock-on effect of you following your intuition, and like how powerful the simplest things that you can do actually do create that effect. When I started listening to my intuition, of course, I was only using it on things that were big for me. And I was like, life-changing decisions for me. But then I started using it on things like, what should I eat? And that obviously had a life-changing effect on me. But then I would start using it on things like which gas station I should go to, or should I turn here, or should I say this, and just being a total open to whatever my spleen tells me to do. And for example, my spleen, I didn't even need gas one time, and my spleen was like, go get gas. And I was like, okay, maybe I don't know. I can't make sense of why I needed gas and I had a half a tank. So I go and I pull up, and there's a woman in front of me. I've never even shared this with anybody. There's a woman in front of me who was asking people to just fill her tank up with gas so she could get home. And I happened to be there. Like, I cry thinking about it. I happened to be there and be able to fill up her tank for her, and left just being like, wow. It makes me emotional thinking about it. By opening myself up to this, without even really trying, I've become like a vessel for God, the universe, whatever, to do things that it needs to do for people, to gift things to people that it needs to gift to people, to save people, because that's, in my design too, because I'm a 3/5. So there's an element of me that feels so much myself when I save the day.
Mm-hmm.
I got to save the day. And I didn't concoct that in my mind.
Yeah. And that's really the beautiful part, is that if with your logic you said, no, I don't need that, it's not usually the hit or the intuitive thing in itself of what the voice is saying. It's the outcome. And because there's an unlimited amount of causes that can lead to effects, you don't know with your limited mind what that intuition is going to lead you to outcome-wise. So that's what I mean when I say it's our own stupidity that's trying to connect those dots, because we just have these like such basic computers up there trying to think that they even have a candle on, the infinite amount of ways that things can unfold. And there's been so many moments of those kind of things where people just are led to do something, and this is the thing you did though, is that you listened even if you couldn't make sense of it. And that's the part that is the brave part, that we all are now being asked to just trust in more. And you know what? If it doesn't work out, we can go back to our old ways. But I think we're sick enough of our old ways that we may as well give this one a go.
Yeah. And it's not to say that everyone's, drive for listening to their intuition should be to save the world or anything like that. But it is a beautiful thing to consider that you are contributing to the collective when you're listening to that.
well, here's the rules, right? This is ego. The ego is like, either you're here to save the world, or you should just learn that you're ordinary and that you should have like a basic purpose. We are all here to save the world, and we are all not here to be the only one. Thing we have to do is play our part. The way we play our part is not for us to decide. It's just for us to listen to the assignments that we're given. Whatever the instructions that the divine is recalculating at every point. Okay, well, I need to use you, Taylor, to go to the gas station. Okay, and now this woman, I need her to get home to her kids because of this. And because someone did something nice for her, she's going to be a nicer state to say this to the person she would have normally been annoyed at. Or we don't even know. Like, the story only starts with your story. We don't know what happened to this woman, you know? So this is the thing, is this whole like save the world complex. Like, yes, you are here to save the world. And no, you're not the only one.
Which is liberating.
Very. And it's also like, as long as you showed up to your assignments, you're the one who's done the best work, you know, like,
right.
you've won, like, and not over anyone, but just you've won what your soul wanted you to win. Like, you've revealed the light that your soul was supposed to reveal. Like, that's just, and that when you put your head down at the end of the day, like, that's when you're like, oh my God, I would have never, ever chosen to go and fill this woman's gas tank up. And thank you, God, universe, for giving me this such fulfilling opportunity and for giving me the wherewithal to listen when you told me.
Yeah. Because in my movie, that just made me enjoy my movie more and improved her movie, hopefully, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
We have some messages that we have a little voice note service that we put in the link in our Instagram bio. I believe it's in Jenna's Instagram bio as well, and in our TikTok bio. By the way, we're on TikTok. And if you're listening to this on the podcast app, we're actually on YouTube as well. So you can watch this on YouTube. People have submitted little voice notes to you. So I'd like to play maybe one or two for you, and just, not all of them are questions. Some of them are just stories. So if you have like a story of how using your human design has positively affected your life, even like a story about how I listened to my spleen and went to the gas station, like, we would love to hear stories like that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to play one of them for you and share it with everybody.
Okay.
Hey, Jenna. I'm a manifester, and I realized that whenever I'm in that big, bold energy and very unapologetic and just telling people what I want, where I want to go, what I want to do, etc., it's like they were just waiting for that to happen. And on the flip side, if I'm very insecure, for example, if I'm small in myself and I go to the supermarket, it feels so as if they were very irritated by me, as if they're like wondering, what the fuck are you doing? What is that? And also when I'm in a very bad mood, like very angry, for example, like people would like straight look away from me. Like they don't want to be in contact with that. So what I realized is this very impactful energy that I always have, and it's up to me how I use it. So, but it will always be there. So with whatever I come, it's big. And this is like something I realized like was very obvious to me in the last months.
I absolutely love this, and it goes so much with what we were just talking about, because we unconsciously are feeling everyone else's makeup, their design, their blueprint, their essence, whatever you want to call it. And so we can tell when someone is aligned and when someone's not. And we also can kind of know what we're wanting them to be like and how we're going to receive it when they are that and when